Imagine your home, like your actual physical living room, is about to be physically crushed by a heavy machine.
Right.
An excavator's literally going to just, tear right through your walls. And local law enforcement is standing by on the shore to make sure it happens.
Wow. Yeah, it's a terrifying image.
It is.
Yeah.
But when you turn on the evening news to see what's happening, the city council doesn't call it an eviction.
No, they definitely don't.
They don't call it the destruction of a human's home. Instead, you get like a politician in a really crisp suit stepping up to a podium, and they announce a new, and I'm quoting here, visual amenity enhancement initiative.
Visual amenity, right.
Exactly. So today, for you listening at home, we are decoding the deadly hidden language of local bureaucracy. We are taking a deep dive into how mundane, utterly boring municipal paperwork is allegedly being weaponized to quietly erase entire communities.
It really is the ultimate magic trick of modern governance. I mean, you take this highly volatile socio-political conflict, you launder it through all these stakeholder committees and management plans.
Right. Wash it clean.
Exactly. And it comes out the other end looking like a completely neutral, objective, administrative necessity.
I am so glad you're here with us today to walk through this, because our mission for this deep dive is to basically pare down that illusion.
Yeah, let's get into it.
So we are unpacking a very specific, fiercely critical source document today. It's titled The Noosa River Smokescreen, Colonial Gentrification and Sovereign Resistance.
That is a heavy title.
It really is. And this text focuses squarely on the actions of two local bodies. There's Maritime Safety Queensland, which we'll just call MSQ from now on,
Right.
and the Noosa River Stakeholder Advisory Committee.
Now, before we really get into the weeds here, I think it's crucial to point out that the documents we're diving into today are highly, highly politically charged.
Yes. Thank you for bringing that up, because I need to be very clear to everyone listening right now. We are not taking sides on this issue.
Definitely not.
Nor are we endorsing the viewpoints in this document. This text levels some incredibly severe accusations against local maritime authorities.
Yeah. Very severe.
Our job today, our only job, is strictly to impartially unpack the arguments, the rhetoric, and the claims exactly as the author presents them, so you can understand the debate. We're just looking at the mechanics of the argument.
Right. We are essentially stepping inside the reality of this text to see how its gears turn.
Exactly.
And while a core premise spinning those gears is explosive, the text argues that local authorities are using what they call a bureaucratic smokescreen.
A smokescreen.
Yeah. Under the guise of protecting the environment and, ensuring public safety, the claim is that the state is forcefully dispossessing live-aboard residents.
These are people whose entire lives are anchored on the water.
Precisely. Dispossessing them on the sovereign Kabi Kabi waterways of the Noosa River.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because it's an argument about displacement, right? But specifically, displacement by paperwork.
Yeah, that's the perfect way to phrase it. And to really grasp how this operates, we have to look at the timeline the source lays out.
Walk us through it.
So the foundation for all of this was poured between 2021 and 2023. Those were the years when the Noosa River Management Plan was being conceptualized, drafted, and debated in these advisory committees.
Okay, so a 2-year incubation period, essentially.
Right. And after that, the plan didn't just drop all at once. It was deployed in this highly structured, multi-stage rollout stages 1 through 5.
Wow, okay.
And that rollout spans from 2023 all the way to 2025.
If I'm putting myself in the shoes of a local resident, a river management plan sounds incredibly benign.
It sounds great, honestly.
Yeah, in fact, it sounds like something I'd want. You picture, like, speed limits for jet skis or maybe a new program to clean up plastic pollution, right?
Or making sure the boat ramps are well maintained.
Exactly. Normally, when we think of a river management plan, we think of standard civic administration. It sounds like the most boring Tuesday night town hall agenda item imaginable. But this source reads it more like a covert military operation.
Which is precisely what makes the strategy so effective, according to the text. The source uses a very specific, culturally loaded term to describe this entire multi-year administrative process.
Okay.
They call it colonial gammon.
Oh, wow. Colonial gammon.
Yeah.
For anyone listening who isn't familiar with Australian Aboriginal slang, gammon is just a brilliant word.
It really is.
It essentially means fake, pretend, or nonsense. It's a way of calling out a performance. Like if someone is telling you a massive tall tale, you'd say, you're gammon.
Right. And by marrying the word colonial with gammon, the text is leveling this profound structural critique.
How so?
Well, it asserts that the state's entire approach to managing the river, so every public consultation, every drafted PDF, every safety report,
Every little stakeholder meeting.
exactly. It's not an exercise in legitimate civic governance. It is a pantomime.
No, pantomime, so they're saying it's all fake.
The author views the whole bureaucratic process as a calculated performance designed to provide a civilized administrative mask for a campaign of violent gentrification.
It's the weaponization of boredom.
Oh, I like that.
I mean, think about it. If you want to push through a highly controversial agenda like clearing a river of its lower-income, alternative lifestyle residents,
Yeah.
you don't do it with a sweeping, dramatic decree.
No, because you'd have protests in the streets.
Right. Instead, you bury it in stage 3 of a 5-stage river management plan. You exhaust the public with jargon.
You make the process so impenetrable.
Yeah, and so drawn out that by the time the maritime enforcement teams actually show up to seize a boat, the general public just assumes, well, some obscure zoning bylaw was broken.
Exactly. The document frames MSQ and the advisory committees not as public servants attempting to balance community needs, but as the engineers of a calculated multi-year conspiracy.
A conspiracy to violently gentrify unceded Kabi Kabi waters.
That's the claim. And to pull off that conspiracy, the state cannot speak plainly. They must use code words.
We have to decode the specific words being used by the state. Let's get into the first one.
Right, so transitioning from the overarching plan, the first specific bureaucratic code word identified in the source, the first layer of this smokescreen is amenity.
Amenity. Okay, now, amenity is a fascinating word because it has been so completely co-opted by real estate and urban planning.
Oh, absolutely.
If I'm booking a vacation rental, I look for amenities. A hot tub, fast Wi-Fi, maybe a nice coffee maker. It implies comfort, pleasantness, a little bit of luxury.
Right.
Wait, isn't amenity just a planner's word for making the town look nice? Why does the source treat it like a weapon?
Well, the source calls the use of this word a premeditated water grab.
A water grab, just by using the word amenity.
Yes. The source notes that throughout those 2021 to 2023 committee discussions, the concept of improving amenity was quietly but consistently bundled together with marine safety.
Oh, they tie them together.
Exactly. And the text asks us to step back and interrogate the word. Amenity for whom?
Right. Who gets to decide what is visually pleasing?
The argument is that in this specific context, amenity is colonial code for prioritizing the aesthetics of wealthy waterfront property owners.
Okay, let's break down the psychology of that waterfront property owner for a second. You've just dropped $5, maybe $10 million on a stunning architectural home on the edge of the Noosa River.
A lot of money.
In your mind, your property line might legally end at the high tide mark, but your perceived ownership extends all the way out to the horizon. You bought the view.
You paid for that pristine backdrop. And the document actually quotes that exact prevailing sentiment. The author says these are people who paid millions for our view.
Paid millions for our view. Wow.
Yeah. And the brutal reality of that economic bracket is that people who paid millions for a magazine cover Riverview simply do not want to look out their floor-to-ceiling windows and see a cluster of older, independent houseboats anchored 50 meters offshore.
Right, because the boats become a visual disruption to their real estate investment.
Yes.
But, I mean, a local politician can't exactly go on the record and say, hey, everyone, we need to deploy water police to evict these citizens because the millionaire in the mansion thinks their boat is ugly and it's hurting property values.
Joe, that is political suicide.
See, it sounds elitist. It sounds cruel.
And that is where the bureaucratic translation machine kicks in. You don't pass a law protecting property values. You pass a policy enhancing the visual amenity of the Noosa River.
Right. Because who could possibly argue against amenity?
The genius of the bureaucratic smokescreen is that it creates an unassailable public good.
You look like a villain if you say, I'm anti-amenity.
Exactly. By framing the erasure of alternative lifestyles as an aesthetic public service, the state protects private wealth without ever having to actually mention money.
It reminds me so much of the mid-20th century urban renewal projects across America and Australia.
Oh, that's a great comparison.
Yeah, city planners would identify lower income, often minority neighborhoods, and slap the label of blight on them.
Blight, right, another powerful word.
Once a neighborhood was officially declared blighted, the city had the moral and legal authority to bulldoze it, usually to build a highway or a commercial center that benefited the wealthier suburbs.
And the people living there are just pushed out.
Exactly. The language of renewal and amenity completely obscures the human cost. It sanitizes displacement.
It reduces human beings to visual clutter.
Oh, visual clutter.
And the document argues that this weaponization of aesthetics ensures that your right to exist in a space is entirely contingent on whether or not someone richer than you enjoys looking at you.
That is so bleak.
If your lifestyle disrupts the visual perfection demanded by the real estate market, well then you are a threat to amenity.
But even amenity has its limits as a bureaucratic tool, doesn't it?
How do you mean?
Well, if you push too hard on just making things look pretty, eventually the public might push back and say, hey, aesthetics aren't a good enough reason to make someone homeless. You need a stronger justification.
You need a trump card.
Right. And if amenity is the quiet goal, the loud excuse used to enforce it has to be safety.
Exactly. In local government, the ultimate trump card is safety. If amenity is the quiet, underlying goal of this water grab, safety is the loud, public-facing battering ram used to execute it.
Okay, so how does the source say they deployed this safety battering ram?
The source provides a deeply specific example of how this safety narrative was manufactured. They call it the bather smokescreen.
The bather smokescreen. Okay, set the scene for this. When and how does this safety argument actually get introduced to the public?
We have to look back at the media reporting from around June and August of 2021.
Okay, early on in the process.
Right. This was when the Noosa River Stakeholder Advisory Committee was putting forward its initial recommendations. The report suggested that the authorities needed to introduce a marine zone to prevent vessels from anchoring near the shorelines.
Okay.
And the explicit stated reason for this new restriction was to protect areas that are, quote, desirably retained for bathers.
Desirably retained for bathers. So we're talking about families swimming.
Kids splashing in the shallows.
Right. The argument being presented to the public is that we have these big, heavy houseboats swinging on their anchors far too close to where little Pimmy is trying to swim.
And we need to push the boats away before someone gets crushed.
That is the narrative.
That is the narrative. But the source calls this classic bureaucratic code. It accuses the authorities of deliberately manufacturing a fake conflict.
Manufactured conflict? Between who?
Between the general public, the bathers, and the houseboat residents. By framing the live aboards as an imminent physical danger to everyday families enjoying the river, the authorities instantly bypass any debate about aesthetics.
That is incredibly manipulative if you think about the mechanics of it.
Very.
You are pitting the general public against a marginalized group. And once you convince the public that the target demographic is a safety hazard, the deployment of the Maritime Enforcement Team, the MET, isn't seen as an act of state overreach.
It's seen as a necessary rescue operation.
Yes. The public practically demands the police go in and clear the river to keep their kids safe.
But here's where it gets really interesting. The source's analysis pierces right through that narrative by pointing out a massive glaring paradox in this safety agenda.
Well, this is the part about the 28-day rule, right?
Yes. MSQ's primary enforcement mechanism is the 28-day eviction rule.
Let's look at the actual physics and reality of this rule, because this is where the state's logic seems to just completely collapse on itself. If the stated goal is safety, how does this 28-day rule function in the real world?
So the rule mandates that vessels cannot remain anchored in one legally permitted spot indefinitely.
Okay.
Every 28 days, they are legally forced to pull up anchor and move to a new location.
Now, on paper, in a sterile committee room, that sounds perfectly reasonable.
It sounds like managing traffic flow, right? Preventing permanent squatting.
Sure. It's like a street sweeping rule for cars. You have to move your car every Tuesday so the sweeper can get by. It makes total sense if you're talking about a Toyota Camry.
Right.
But we are not talking about cars. We are talking about floating homes.
And that is the crux of the text's analysis. The physical reality of these vessels is that they are entirely riverbound.
Meaning they aren't meant for the ocean.
Exactly. They are flat-bottomed, top-heavy structures designed exclusively for calm, inland waters. They are essentially floating apartments with low-powered engines that can barely fight a strong outgoing tide.
They have zero open ocean navigational capability.
None. And to comply with the 28-day rule, the text claims that because the permitted anchoring zones are being systematically reduced and congested by the state...
Because of the bather zones and amenity restrictions.
Right. Because of all that, these residents are essentially forced out of the river mouth just to reset their anchoring clock or to try and find new legal ground.
Wait. To get out of the river mouth, they have to cross the bar, right?
They have to cross an ocean bar. The document describes it as a treacherous ocean bar.
I need to pause here and explain the terrifying reality of an ocean bar to anyone who hasn't spent time on the water.
Please do, because it's vital context.
A river bar is a buildup of sand at the mouth of a river. It's where the outgoing current of the river collides directly with the incoming swell of the ocean.
Right.
When those two massive forces meet in shallow water, the physics become violent. The waves don't just roll gracefully. They stand straight up, they break unpredictably, and they create deep, swirling troughs.
It's basically a washing machine of water.
Exactly. Even for highly experienced captains in deep-hulled, powerful, ocean-going yachts, crossing a river bar is considered one of the most dangerous maneuvers in boating. You have to time it perfectly with the tides and the weather. If you get it wrong, your boat rolls over and people die.
Now, take that violent hydrodynamic reality and insert a flat-bottomed houseboat shaped like a shoebox.
Oh my God.
Powered by an engine that struggles against a moderate headwind.
It is a death sentence. It's not just dangerous, it's mathematically guaranteed to result in a catastrophe.
So the source is pointing out that the state, in the name of protecting bathers from a hypothetical bump on the head, is legally mandating that independent caretakers risk their lives in open ocean conditions.
Conditions their homes were never engineered to survive.
It is the ultimate paradox. The document uses this physical reality to argue that the state does not actually care about safety.
Because if they did, they wouldn't force them into the ocean.
Exactly. If the preservation of human life were the genuine metric, no maritime authority would ever force a riverbound vessel into an ocean surf zone. Therefore, the conclusion is that safety is purely a bureaucratic tool.
It's a manufactured hurdle.
It is an impossible condition imposed upon the residents designed to inevitably trigger their failure.
It's a perfectly engineered catch-22.
Yeah.
Think about it. If you stay anchored to protect your home and your life, you are breaking the 28-day rule. And the Maritime Enforcement Team evicts you, fines you, and potentially seizes your boat.
Right.
But if you comply with the rule and try to move, you capsize your home on the sandbar and lose everything anyway.
Either way, the river is cleared, the amenity is enhanced, the million-dollar view is protected.
That is incredibly dark. And to execute a campaign that pushes people into such desperate, dangerous corners, the authorities cannot allow the broader public to view these residents sympathetically, can they?
No, absolutely not. You cannot have the community viewing these people as victims of a bureaucratic trap. You have to actively shape the public's perception of who these people are.
And what their homes represent.
Yeah.
To justify pushing people into dangerous situations, the authorities need to paint the residents as a nuisance.
You have to strip them of their humanity.
You have to make the destruction of their homes feel like a victory for the community. Which brings us to the specific linguistic tactics. The labels weaponized by MSQ during the 2023 to 2025 rollout.
The weaponization of language.
What were the specific terms used?
The source outlines 3 specific, highly charged terms that MSQ systematically fed into the public discourse to describe the targeted vessels. They called them derelict, abandoned, and eyesore.
Derelict, abandoned, eyesore. It is a masterclass in dark public relations.
It really is.
Because if I stand at a press conference as a public official and say, tomorrow morning, our officers will board the vessel of a long-term local resident, forcibly remove them, and destroy their home, the public would be horrified.
There would be human rights lawyers filing injunctions before lunch.
Exactly. But if I stand at that same podium wearing a serious expression and announce, tomorrow morning, our teams are conducting a vital cleanup operation to rid our beautiful river of abandoned derelict eyesores, the dynamic completely flips.
You are no longer an oppressor. You are a custodian of the environment.
You're the hero.
You're the hero. And the text argues that MSQ utilized these exact labels to establish no anchoring zones with full public support.
Wow.
The moral cover of cleaning up derelicts allowed them to systematically push all the houseboats, regardless of whether they were actually derelict or perfectly maintained, into highly concentrated pockets of the river.
They essentially corralled them into aquatic ghettos.
Exactly. And the source highlights a deeply visceral, deeply hypocritical reality regarding this eyesore narrative.
What's the hypocrisy?
The text provides striking imagery of well-maintained houseboats. We're talking vessels equipped with solar panels, fresh paint, vessels that are functional, legitimate homes for independent residents.
Okay.
These pristine homes are being targeted by enforcement teams and, to quote the text, crushed in a machine.
Crushed in a machine. That phrasing is so brutal.
And it needs to be, because we aren't talking about a parking ticket.
Right. We aren't talking about towing a boat to an impound lot where you can just pay a fee to get it back.
Right.
We're talking about the total state-sponsored physical annihilation of a person's living space and all their possessions.
It is the absolute zenith of state power, the ability to legally destroy your shelter.
But wait, you mentioned a hypocrisy. Where does that come in?
The profound hypocrisy that the author points to is that while these functional, well-kept homes are being fed into crushers, there are other boats on the river that are actual derelicts.
What do you mean?
Boats that are rusting, covered in barnacles, half sunk. The literal textbook definition of a neglected hazard. And they are allowed to remain untouched indefinitely.
Wait, really? How is that possible?
It's true.
If the whole campaign is about clearing derelict eyesores, how does an actual derelict boat survive the purge?
Because of one specific bureaucratic caveat. The neglected boats are allowed to stay, provided they hold an official state-sanctioned mooring.
Let me make sure I'm completely understanding the mechanics of this.
Sure.
I could own a boat that is literally leaking oil into the river. A total hazard to navigation. A visual nightmare.
Right.
But because I am paying a recurring fee to the state for an official mooring apparatus attached to the riverbed, the maritime enforcement teams will look the other way.
According to the source's analysis of the enforcement patterns, yes. The payment for the mooring acts as a shield.
But if I live on a beautiful, pristine, off-grid houseboat,
Yep.
and I choose to drop my own anchor independently rather than paying into the state's formalized mooring system,
Then you are subjected to the 28-day rule. You are labeled an eyesore, and your home is targeted for destruction.
that is insane. That precise contradiction dismantles the state's entire narrative.
It does. If an ugly boat on a paid mooring is safe, and a beautiful boat on an independent anchor is crushed, it proves irrefutably that the enforcement has absolutely nothing to do with visual aesthetics.
Or environmental health, or public safety.
Exactly.
It is entirely about control and compliance. It's a rent extraction scheme disguised as environmentalism.
That's what the author is arguing.
If you are tethered to the state's financial system, your quote-unquote eyesore is protected by the bureaucracy. But if you attempt to exist independently outside of the property tax and mooring fee matrix, your existence is criminalized.
The author posits that the state simply cannot tolerate independent living. It represents a leak in the system.
Right.
But the text doesn't just rely on analyzing enforcement hypocrisy and linguistic tricks. The author brings forward what they consider to be the undeniable mathematical proof of their thesis.
Oh, this is the smoking gun of the document.
Yes, the smoking gun.
Okay, this is where the argument transcends sociology and gets into cold, hard zoning policy. If safety, health, and aesthetics are all just smokescreens, what is the undeniable proof?
The evidence is found in a massive documented double standard within the actual NRSAC recommendations and MSQ regulations.
Walk us through it.
The text reveals that the crushing weight of these restrictions, the 28-day anchoring limits, the shifting no anchoring zones, the constant harassment by the Métis, apply exclusively to one category of vessel.
Which is?
Privately owned recreational vessels, the independent levaboards.
And who is exempt?
Registered commercial vessels are entirely explicitly exempt from these anchoring restrictions.
Wait, completely exempt?
Yes. The text specifically names commercial fishing vessels and most damningly chartered commercial houseboats.
Okay, I want everyone listening to visualize this scenario because it literally breaks the laws of physics.
It really does.
Picture two houseboats anchored side by side on the Noosa River. They were built in the same factory. They had the exact same hull displacement, the same engine, the same holding tanks, the same physical footprint.
They are identical.
Mathematically and chemically, they interact with the river ecosystem in the exact same way.
Right.
But one is privately owned by an independent resident who lives off the grid. The other is owned by a corporate entity that rents it out to tourists for weekend bachelor parties.
Okay.
That is the setup.
So what does this all mean for the listener? According to the bureaucracy, the private houseboat is a toxic eyesore, a lethal threat to bathers, a menace to amenity, and must be subjected to a 28-day rule that might force it out into a deadly ocean bar.
Yes.
But the corporate houseboat, because it has a commercial charter sticker slapped on the hull, the bureaucracy magically declares it to be perfectly safe, aesthetically pleasing, and environmentally harmless.
It can anchor wherever it wants for as long as it wants.
How does a corporate registration sticker change the hydrodynamic and environmental impact of a boat? It doesn't. And what's fascinating here is that this is exactly the author's point. This contradiction validates their entire thesis. The rules cannot logically be about the health of the river.
Because pollution doesn't care about tax brackets.
Exactly. A boat hull scraping across a delicate seagrass bed damages the ecology in the exact same way, regardless of whether the person at the helm is a long-term resident or a tourist who rented it for the afternoon.
Right.
If the rules were genuinely about environmental stewardship, they would apply to the physical impact of the vessel, not the financial status of its owner.
So, if a private houseboat is supposedly a threat, how does slapping a commercial sticker on it make it safe? It doesn't. The double standard exposes the true agenda.
The source is essentially saying that the state is perfectly happy to let vessels impact the river, just as long as the entities doing the impacting are generating commercial profit and paying commercial licensing fees. The text concludes that commercial vessels, which exist solely to exploit the waterway for financial gain, are given a free pass by the authorities. Meanwhile, the independent residents, who the author pointedly refers to as independent caretakers of the river face, this mathematically impossible compliance.
So if the goal isn't environmental protection or public safety, the source claims the goal is engineering homelessness.
Specifically, engineering homelessness to protect what the author calls a commercial monopoly.
A commercial monopoly.
Yes. By systematically clearing out the independent liveaboards, the state is ensuring that the only legally permissible way to experience the Noosa River is to pay a premium for it.
Right. You either buy a multi-million-dollar waterfront mansion or you pay a daily rate to a state-sanctioned commercial charter monopoly.
The river is forcibly transitioned from being a shared sovereign commons into a highly regulated exclusive commercial zone.
It is the ultimate privatization of a public natural resource, enforced by a taxpayer-funded maritime police force, and sold to the public as an environmental safety initiative.
That is a profoundly heavy accusation.
It really is. It suggests that local bureaucracy isn't just inefficient, it's predatory.
And to fully grasp the gravity of that predation, we have to take a step back to look at the macro-level implications of everything we've discussed so far.
Yeah, let's zoom out.
Because the author doesn't just view this as a fight between rich property owners and low-income boaters. They frame this entire bureaucratic process within a much older, much deeper historical context.
Right.
Throughout the text, the author continually refers to these waters as the unceded Kabi Kabi waterways.
This is such a vital layer. It elevates the document from a local municipal dispute into a conversation about ongoing indigenous sovereignty.
Exactly.
The underlying argument is that MSQ and the local councils don't actually have the moral or sovereign right to be passing these laws in the first place.
The text expresses a profound righteous anger over the state's use of what we could call the illusion of inclusion.
Illusion of inclusion.
Yeah, and the primary target of this anger is the bureaucratic practice of the acknowledgement of country.
For our listeners who might be outside of Australia, we should explain how this works. An acknowledgement of country is a formal, scripted statement, typically read at the very beginning of government meetings, public events, or school assemblies.
Right.
It formally recognizes and pays respect to the traditional indigenous owners of the land, in this case the Kabi Kabi people, where the meeting is taking place. It was originally designed to be a step towards reconciliation.
But the author points out the staggering, almost grotesque cognitive dissonance of this practice within the context of the Noosa River Stakeholder Advisory Committee.
Got a picture for us.
So picture the scene. The committee convenes to finalize Stage 3 of a plan that will, in reality, deploy armed enforcement teams to seize homes and clear the river for commercial charters.
Okay.
Before they vote, a bureaucrat clears their throat and reads a polite script acknowledging the sovereign Kabi Kabi people as the traditional custodians of the waterways.
Oh, wow. It is treating a profound cultural and historical reality as a piece of mandatory meeting trivia.
Yes. They acknowledge the sovereignty of the Kabi Kabi people and then immediately flip to page 2 of the agenda to enforce colonial commercial zoning laws over those exact same waters.
Completely bypassing any actual indigenous authority.
That is the crux of the critique. The text states there is a complete lack of sovereign Kabi Kabi authority in the actual policymaking.
So the acknowledgement is just empty.
The acknowledgement of country is not an act of respect. It is, as the author frames it, another form of colonial doublespeak. It is the ultimate smokescreen.
It creates this optical illusion of progressive, inclusive, modern governance.
Right. If a committee is acknowledging traditional owners, the public assumes the committee is acting ethically.
But behind that progressive verbal mask, the actual physical machinery of the state is carrying out the exact same historical process of dispossession that's been happening for over 2 centuries.
They are just using zoning PDFs and mooring fees instead of muskets.
Let me try to summarize how the state machine relies on this bureaucratic friction, this colonial doublespeak.
Go for it.
They say safety when they mean eviction.
Exactly.
They say amenity when they mean gentrification.
Right.
They label functional homes as derelict to justify destruction. And they perform an acknowledgement of sovereignty to mask